Who are you inspired by?
Well, Kanye West, obviously.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and like Elon Musk says,
you have to really believe in what you're creating and know in your heart and mind that this is something that matters.
And that's why I make these videos, to help you believe in yourself and make something that matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with
Believe Nation.
I think, so when you create a company, I mean, if you think, well, what is a company really? A company is a group of people gathered together to create a product or service. And that's really all a company is. And so you have to really believe in what you're creating and that and know in your heart and mind that this is something that matters, and that the world ought to have. And I think it's important to investors to show that you're all in. And I think, for example, with Tesla, the fact that I invested all the money I had, literally I had to borrow money from friends to pay the rent in 2008. The fact that I was all in, I think, made a huge difference to the investors, to convince them to invest in Tesla at the same time that say GM and Chrysler were going bankrupt. Yeah, I think you have to show that you really care. Like it's like that you've got skin in the game, and that you've given it everything that you've got, and then the other people at the company will follow suit, as will investors. I think that's really important.
Rule number 2, focus on hardcore engineering.
Why do you think Tesla succeeded, whereas other car companies failed in their methods of electric cars? Like, why do you think Tesla is the leader in this idea?
Well, I mean, there haven't been that many car company startups. I mean, there was sort of Fisker and Coda, and then a few smaller ones, and then the rest has sort of been some fairly small-scale efforts by the big companies. I think if we say, what was the difference between, say, Fisker and Tesla, that's maybe the most direct comparison. Tesla is a hardcore engineering company, and Fisker is kind of it's based on styling. You know, it's like styling is good, important, but that's not the reason we don't have electric cars. So it's not, but for styling we would have electric cars. That's not the reason. So in the case of Fisker, they made a car that a lot of people think looked really good, but didn't work properly. So then people don't want to buy the car. That's like a pretty reasonable thing, I think. I mean, if you think of what's the point of a company existing? The point is that it's a group of people that have gathered together to create a product. If the product is good, the company should exist, and if it is not good, the company should not exist. That seems like fundamental to the nature of companies. So clearly then one should focus on making the absolute best product you can, otherwise you reduce the probability of success. But a lot of companies focus on things that aren't really to do with the product, as though a company has any basis for existing apart from doing useful things. That's kind of strange.
Rule number 3, be driven.
What drives you? What is it that when you wake up in the morning, do you see a problem and you want to solve it?
I think the thing that drives me is that I want to be able to think about the future and feel good about that. We're doing what we can to have the future be as good as possible. to be inspired by what is likely to happen, and to look forward to the next day. So that's what really drives me, is trying to figure out how to make sure that things are great and going to be so, and that's the underlying principle behind Tesla and SpaceX. Is that I think it's pretty important that we accelerate the transition to sustainable generation and consumption of energy. It's inevitable, but it matters if it happens sooner or later. And then SpaceX is about helping make life multiplanetary, and doing what we can to continue the dream of Apollo, and ultimately make a contribution to life becoming multiplanetary.
Rule number 4, press on.
As you recall, the recession was particularly difficult for car companies, and right as in the summer of 2008 we had to raise a big funding round, but because of the collapse in the financial system, that funding round didn't happen, and we had to piece together the money to keep the company going from myself and existing investors, and we were able to just complete a financing round that was just barely enough to keep the company going, and we closed it on the last hour of the last day that it was possible to do so. It was Christmas Eve, 2008, 6 p.m. And after that, the investors would have they were going on vacation, wouldn't have been possible to bring them back to the table, and we would have run out of money a few days after Christmas. So that was also a close call. So while things are going really well these days, I think it's always important to remember that when you're creating a company, there are very dark times, and it's about getting through those dark times. That's the difference between success and failure.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
Rule number 5, don't reason by analogy.
After that third trip, I'd learned a lot more about rockets at that point, and I held a series of meetings, just sort of brainstorming sessions with people from the space industry to try to understand if I was missing something fundamental about the ability to improve rocketry. And this is where I think it's helpful to use the approach, the analytical approach in physics, which is to try to boil things down to first principles and reason from there, as opposed to reasoning by analogy. And the way this applied to rocketry was to say, okay, well, what are the materials that go into a rocket? How much does each material constituent weigh? What's the cost of that raw material? And that's going to set some floor as to the cost of the rocket. And that actually turns out to be a relatively small number. Certainly well under 5% of the cost of a rocket, and in some cases closer to 1 or 2%. And so I call it sort of maybe the magic wand number. So if you had a pile of the raw material, piles of raw materials on the floor, and you could just wave a magic wand and rearrange them, then that would be the best case scenario for a rocket. And so I was able to see, okay, well, there's clearly a great deal of room for improvement, even if you consider rockets to be expendable. And so I think that's what I mean by sort of thinking about things from a first principle standpoint. If on the other hand, I sort of analyzed it by analogy and said, okay, well, analogy would be, well, what are all other rocket companies, what do their rockets cost, what historically have other rockets cost, and that would be sort of an analogy thing, but it really doesn't illustrate what the true potential is. And so I think sort of a first principles approach is a good way to understand what new things are possible. So this is a good framework.
Rule number 6, be optimistic.
The proposed Mars expedition, how exactly do you plan on making it cost efficient?
Sure. Well, now that is indeed a tricky problem. I mean, I feel reasonably possible that that success is at least one of the possible outcomes. This is pretty important when you're trying to do something. It's like, well, can that be one of the outcomes? I wasn't actually confident about that until a few years ago. Now, I'm not saying we will get there, but I'm confident that it is at least possible. And the key to that is having a fully reusable Mars transportation system, so that all you're replacing between flights, maybe apart from minor maintenance, is the propellant. I mean, this like reusability is so fundamental to having a major change in space flight. It would be difficult to overstate its importance. But I mean, I think with analogy to other modes of transport, you can imagine that if airplanes could only be used once, very few people would fly, because it would be super crazy expensive. I guess like a 747 costs $250 million. You'd need 2 of them just for a round trip. But people are not paying $500 million to fly back and forth to London. And that's because you can use the 747 like 20,000 times. And for a rocket, a Falcon 9 rocket costs about $60 million to build. And so if it can be used once, obviously that's a $60 million capital cost. But if it can be used 1,000 times, then it's only a $60,000 capital cost. And I mean, that is, it is the fundamental difference. So you have to have fully reusable, then you have to make sure that the propellant used is as low cost as possible. So our next generation rockets will be using methane as a fuel, which methane is the lowest cost source fuel on the planet, by a good margin. So, and so I think if your propellant costs are low and the system is fully reusable, then I think it should be possible to move to Mars for less than $500,000, which I think is an important threshold, because if people can sell all this stuff on Earth and move to Mars, well, and there's enough people who can do that, combined with those who actually want to do that, that's the fundamental thing needed to have a growing colony on Mars. I mean, kind of like the way that the U.S. was, like the early English colonies in America. When it became affordable for people to sell all their stuff in England and move to America, it grew really fast. In the absence of that, it would just require humongous amounts of government support, and I think probably wouldn't result in a self-sustaining civilization. So the economics of it are extremely fundamental.
Rule number 7, get the rules right.
It sure is important to get the rules right. It's sort of, in terms of legislative and executive actions, it's sort of like, think of, say, like professional sports or something. If you don't have the rules right, if there isn't, if the game isn't set up properly, it's not going to be a good game. So it's real important to get the rules right. Now, I think it's worth noting that I think still, in the United States, the rules are still better than anywhere else. It's very easy to put something in place which is an inhibitor to innovation without realizing it. So in terms of the regulatory environment, it's always important to bear in mind that regulations are immortal, and they never die unless somebody actually goes and kills them, and then they get a lot of momentum. So a lot of times regulations can be put in place for all the right reasons, but then nobody goes back and gets rid of them afterwards when they no longer make sense. And there used to be a rule in the early days when people were concerned about automobiles, because that was a pretty scary thing, see a carriage just going wrong by itself. You never know what those things might do. So there were like rules where you had to, in a lot of states, where you had to carry a lantern in front of the automobile. And it had to be like 100 paces ahead of the automobile. There had to be someone with a lantern on a pole. I'm like, okay, but you should really get rid of that regulation. And they did, because it would really be awkward. So just regulations, even if done correctly and being right at the time, it's always important to go back and scrub those, periodically to make sure they're still sensible and they're still serving the greater good.
Rule number 8, hire people who care.
When you hire people, or really what you're trying to, when you hire people, that just means you're convincing people to join you in the endeavor. You should hire people that are also passionate about what you're doing. So it's not just that they're not just there for the salary. They really need to care about what they're doing, and then they will stay during the dark times.
Rule number 9, listen to feedback.
Here's another question from a Tesla owner. Why is there no coat hook in the back?
Yeah.
He or she says, you can design a rocket, but you forgot the coat hooks?
Well, I didn't actually forget it. I intentionally didn't like it, so I didn't put it there. The aesthetics of it really bothered me, but and I know, obviously, some people disagree with that decision. But I think we might have a retroactive fix for that if somebody has the panoramic roof, which is to basically have a hook on the bow section in the middle of the roof, and then your coat could hang down in the second row passenger footwell, which is actually slightly better than having a coat hook that's stuck on the side of the car. So I think we'll probably do that. Yeah.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is think big.
How do we figure out how to take you to Mars and create a self-sustaining city, a city that is not merely an outpost, but could become a planet in its own right, and for us, thus we could become a truly multi-planet species. Sometimes people wonder, well, what about other places in the solar system? Why Mars? Just to sort of put things into perspective, this is an actual scale of what the solar system looks like. So we're currently in the third little rock from the left. That's Earth. Yeah, exactly. And our goal is to go to the fourth rock on the left. That's Mars. But you can get a sense for the real scale of the solar system, how big the Sun is, and Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, and then the little guys on the right are Pluto and friends. This sort of helps see it not quite to scale, but it gives you a better sense for where things are. So our options for becoming a multi-planet species within our solar system are limited. We have, in terms of nearby options, we've got Venus, but Venus is a super high pressure hot acid bath. So that would be a tricky one. Venus is not at all like the goddess. This is not in no way similar to the actual goddess. So
it's really difficult to make things work on Venus. Mercury is also way too close to the sun. We could go potentially on one of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, but those are quite far out, much further from the sun, a lot harder to get to. It really leaves us with one option if we want to become a multi-planet civilization, and that's Mars. We could conceivably go to our moon, and I certainly have nothing against going to the moon, but I think it's challenging to create become multi-planetary on the moon because it's much smaller than a planet. It doesn't have any atmosphere. It's not as resource-rich as Mars. It's got a 28-day day, whereas the Mars day is 24.5 hours. And in general, Mars is far better suited to ultimately scale up to be a self-sustaining civilization.
The overall objective of Tesla is really what set of actions can we take to accelerate the advent of sustainable production and consumption of energy. I think the sort of the way I would assess the historic good of Tesla is in terms of how many years of acceleration was it, and if we can accelerate sustainable energy by 10 years, I would consider that to be a great success. Even if it was only 5 years, that would still be pretty good. That's the overarching optimization.
First of all, you don't need college to learn stuff, okay? Everything is available basically for free. You can learn anything you want for free. It is not a question of learning. There is a value that colleges have, which is like, seeing whether can somebody work hard at something, including a bunch of sort of annoying homework assignments, and still do their homework assignments and kind of soldier through and get it done. That's like the main value of college. And then also, if you probably want to hang around with a bunch of people your own age for a while instead of going right into the workforce. So I think colleges are basically for fun and to prove you can do your chores, but they're not for learning.
The real way I think you actually achieve intellectual property protection is by innovating fast enough. If your rate of innovation is high, then you don't need to worry about protecting the IP because other companies will be copying something that you did years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. Just make sure your rate of innovation is fast. Speed of innovation is what matters. And I do say this to my teams quite a lot, that innovation per unit time, as I go innovation per year, if you want to say it, is what matters, not innovation absent time. Because if you wanted to make, say, 100% improvement in something, and that took 100 years or 1 year, that's radically different. So it's like, what is your rate of innovation? That matters. And is the rate of innovation, is that accelerating or decelerating? And a weird thing happens when companies get big is that most companies or organizations, the bigger they get, they tend to get less innovative. Not just less innovative on a per person basis, but less innovative in the absolute. And I think this is probably because the incentive structure is not there for innovation. It's not enough to use words to encourage innovation. The incentive structure must be aligned with that. That's fundamental.
You need to work, depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, I mean, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say. Particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. I came to the conclusion that my initial premise was wrong. That in fact, there's a great deal of will. There's not such a shortage, but people don't think there's a way, and that if people thought there was a way, or at least something that wouldn't break the federal budget, then people would support it. Which, in retrospect, I think is actually kind of obvious, because the United States is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. People came here from other places. I mean, it's there's no nation that's more a nation of explorers than the United States, but people need to believe that it's possible, and that it's not, they don't have to give up like healthcare or something important. Right. It's got to be that's important. So I thought, okay, well, then it's not a question of will. It's a question of showing that there's a way. In the beginning, nobody wanted a Tesla. I can tell you that. When we made the original sort of roadster sports car, people were like, well, why would I want an electric car? My gasoline car works fine. I'm like, no, electric car is better. I should try it. And it was hard to get people to do a test drive. First of all, nobody knew who we were. I never heard of this company. And I'm like, yeah, we're named after Nikola Tesla. You know that guy? Nope. So for sure we were doing push in the beginning, because people said there was no one telling us that they wanted an electric car. So it was not out of like, it was like lots of people coming up to me saying, hey, I really want an electric car. I heard that 0 times. So people were like, it's like, man, we better make an electric car and show that these things can be good, and then people will want them. It's like, I think it was like Henry Ford said, like when we talk about the Model T, it's like if you asked the public what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. Mm-hmm. So if you did like a big survey and said, hey, public, before automobiles, what would you like? It's like, well, I'd like my horse to go 3 miles an hour faster and eat less food and be stronger and live longer and that kind of thing. There'll all be basically a bunch of incremental improvements on horse. Because people, when you say like, well, what about an automobile, like car that drives itself? Like, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy. But when you actually make an automobile and give it to people and say, okay, now this is a horse where you can keep it in the barn, and if you leave for a month, it's still alive. Yeah. So carry more weight than a horse and go further and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's like when it's a radically new product, people don't know that they want it because it's just not in their scope. I think when they first started making TVs, they did a nationwide survey. I think this might have been like 46 or 48. It was like a famous nationwide survey. Will you ever buy a TV? And it was like 96% of respondents said no. Some crazy number. Like basically everyone's like, would you buy a TV? And maybe they put a price in there or something, I don't know. But it was famously, almost everyone said they would not buy a TV, but they didn't know what they were talking about.
So the big game-changing stuff at the beginning is a company push kind of a thing most of the time, but then changes to the product over time can be a lot more customer pull kind of a focus.
Yeah, changes to the product over time can be incremental changes. Then the customers can certainly tell you, it's good to get customer feedback to say, how can we improve the product? And once they're using it, they can say, okay, I like this thing about it, I don't like this other thing, and then we can improve the product over time. Customer feedback after they have the fundamental thing is great.
I think failure is bad. I don't think it's good. But if something's important enough, then you do it even though the risk of failure is high. And so I think my advice if somebody wants to start a company is they should bear in mind that the most likely outcome is that it's not going to work. And they should reconcile themselves to that strong possibility. And they should only do it if they feel that they are really compelled to do it, you know. Right. Because it's going to, the way starting a company works is like, usually in the very beginning it's kind of fun, and then it's really hellish for a number of years.
You talked about chewing glass.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who's a successful entrepreneur, and started actually his career around the same time as I did, and he has a good phrase. His name's Billy. He said, "Yeah, starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss," and you agree with that? Generally true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you don't eat the glass, you're not going to be successful.
Well, we have a lot of good people at SpaceX. That a lot of really talented people. In fact, I wonder, like, sometimes how we can make use of their talents in the best way, because you know, I think we're often not using their talents in the best way. Yeah, but you know, to the point of the question that was just asked, I want to make sure Tesla recruiting does not have anything that says requires university, because that's absurd. But there is a requirement of evidence of exceptional ability. Like, you just can't, if you're trying to do something exceptional, they must have evidence of exceptional ability. I don't consider going to college evidence of exceptional ability. In fact, ideally, you dropped out and did something. I mean, obviously, you know, we look at, like, you know, Gates is a pretty smart guy, he dropped out. Jobs is pretty smart, he dropped out. You know, Larry Ellison, smart guy, he dropped out. I'm like, obviously not needed. So, did Shakespeare even go to college? Probably not. I think of these things as just, there's a certain amount of time, and within that time, you want the best net outcome. So, for, you know, all the set of actions that you can do, there's going to be, and some of which will fail, some of which will succeed, and you want the net useful output of your set of actions to be the highest. I'm going to like use like a baseball analogy. Like, you know, baseball, they don't let you just sit there and wait for the perfect pitch until you get a real easy one. They can give you 3 shots, and on the third one, they say, okay, and they get off they go back to put somebody else up there. So your 3 strikes on the baseball, not on bat anymore. So what you're really looking for is, like, what's the batting average? You know, how you doing on score, and just there's going to be some amount of failure, but you want your net output, net useful output to be maximized. Failure is essentially irrelevant unless it is catastrophic.
Don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach of first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. You know, I believe in the scientific method, and one should have a healthy skepticism of things in general. And you know, if you approach things from a scientific standpoint, you always look at things probabilistically, not definitively. And so I think a lot of times if somebody's a skeptic in the science community, what they're really saying is that they're not sure that it's 100% certain that this is the case. But that's not the point. The point is is look at it from the other side. See, what do you think the percentage chance is of this being catastrophic for some meaningful percentage of the Earth's population? Is it greater than 1%? Is it even 1%? If it is even 1%, why are we running this experiment? If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. Well, I mean, if you think about a company is a group of people that are organized to create a product or service. That's what a company is. So in order to create such a thing, you have to convince others to join you in your effort. And so they have to be convinced that it's a sensible thing, that there's at least some reasonable chance of success, and if there is success, that the reward will be commensurate with the effort involved. So I think that's getting people to believe in what you're doing and in you is important. So in the beginning, there will be few people who believe in you or in what you're doing, but then over time, as you make progress, the evidence will build, and more and more people will believe in what you're doing. So I think it's a good idea when creating a company to have a demonstration, or if it's a product, to have like a good mock-up, or if it's software, to have good demoware, or to be able to sketch something so that people can really envision what it's about. Try to get to that point as soon as possible, and then iterate to make it as real as possible, as fast as possible. If you're going to try something innovative, then you're in unexplored territories, so the odds that something will go wrong are pretty high. It's only if you try to do something that is already well understood that there's little chance of failure, but then it will not be interesting or innovative. So, for sure, uncharted territory will result in failures necessarily. Otherwise, you're not trying hard enough.
Did you surround yourself with mentors? Who did you look to for advice?
I read a lot of books and talked to lots of people. I didn't have any one person who was a mentor, but I always look for feedback from people around me, and feedback from an historical context, which is books basically.
And so you want to have a competitive situation where it's truly competitive, where companies aren't gaming the system, and then where the rules are set correctly, and then you need to be on the alert for regulatory capture, where the referees are in fact captured by the players, which is and the players should not control the referees.
You're CEO of 2 companies. You're chairman of Solar City. Talk about time management. How on earth do you do this?
Well,
do you get any sleep?
Yeah, sometimes not enough. Sleep is really great, because I find if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm quite grumpy. Obviously, I think most people are that way. And also, I try to sort of figure out what's the right amount of sleep, because I found I could drop below a certain threshold of sleep, and although I'd be awake more hours and I could sustain it, I would get less done because my mental acuity would be affected. So I found generally the right number for me is around 6 to 6.5 hours on average per night.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And any other tips
on...
on...
That is an average, though.
Right. Any other tips on just managing to run 2 companies simultaneously? I mean, do you find, I know you're up here Monday, Tuesday. Is it all Tesla when you're up in Silicon Valley, and all SpaceX Wednesday, Thursday?
Having a having a smartphone is incredibly helpful because that means you can do email during interstitial periods. Like if you're in a car, you're walking in the bathroom, everywhere. You can do email practically when you're awake. And so that's really helpful to have email for SpaceX and Tesla integrated on my phone. And then it's just you have to apply a lot of hours to actually working. So the way I generally do it is I'll be working at SpaceX on Monday, and then Monday night fly to the Bay Area, spend Tuesday and Wednesday in the Bay Area, then at Tesla, and then fly back on Wednesday night, spend Thursday and Friday at SpaceX. In the last several months, then I would fly back here on a Saturday and either spend Saturday and Sunday at Tesla or spend Saturday at Tesla and Sunday at SpaceX. And generally, you want to embark on something, it's desirable to figure out if success is at least one of the possibilities.
Right, exactly.
Because for sure failure is one of the possibilities.
Yes.
But ideally you want to try to bracket it and say success is in the envelope of outcomes.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure if that was the case. I mean, I think success on an academic level would have been quite likely because you can publish some useless paper, and most papers are pretty useless.
We have a few. Don't take offense to the story.
I mean, how many PhD papers are actually used by someone ever? I mean,
no, that's a good point.
Percentage-wise, it's not good.
Yeah.
So it could have been one of those outcomes where you add some leaves to the tree of knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that leaf is nope, it's not possible.
Right.
Like,
right.
There goes 7 years of my life. So that was one path, and I was prepared to do that. But then the internet came along, and I was like, okay, the internet. I'm pretty sure success is one of the possible outcomes, and it seemed like I could either do a PhD and watch the internet happen, or I could participate and help build it in some fashion. Like I just couldn't stand the idea of watching it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So so I decided to put things on hold and start an internet company. And then that was kind of we worked on internet, like publishing software, maps and directions, Yellow Pages, kind of things.
So, well, first of all, when we interview people, we do ask for some evidence of exceptional ability, which in most cases includes innovation. This is not to say that everyone needs to be innovative. But we certainly need those that are doing advanced engineering to be innovative. And ideally, everyone is at least to some degree innovative. So at the interview point, we select for people who want to create new technology, and then the incentive structure is set up such that innovation is rewarded. Making mistakes along the way does not come with a big penalty. But failure to try to innovate at all comes with a big penalty. You'll be fired.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The carrot and stick.
Yes.
That's the stick.
If you don't even try, or somebody doesn't even try to innovate, or their innovation aspirations are not very good, then yeah, they will no longer be at the company.
I don't have a mentor per se, although I try to get feedback from as many people as possible. So I have like friends, and I ask them to, what they think of this, that, and the other thing, and as mentioned, Larry Page is a good friend of mine. Value his advice a lot, and I have many other good friends, and so I think it's good to solicit feedback, and particularly negative feedback, actually, because obviously people don't love the idea of giving you negative feedback, unless it's like some, on blogs they do that. I mean, it started out. I actually had one of the very first Twitter accounts, like when it was like less than 10,000
people, and then everyone was tweeting at me like what kind of latte they had at Starbucks, and I'm like, well, this seems like the silliest thing ever. So I deleted my Twitter account, and then someone else took it over and started tweeting in my name. And then a couple of friends of mine, Billy and Jason Calacanis, they both said, hey, you should really use Twitter to get your message out. And also somebody's tweeting in your name and they're saying crazy things. So I was like, I'll say crazy things in my name.
Did you have to pay them?
No, they I'm not sure who it was, but it was, for some reason, I don't know, I got my account back. And then I was just, I don't know, to some degree it's like just sort of, I just started tweeting for fun, really. And my early tweets were quite crazy. As I was trying to explain, like, the arc of insanity is short, in that it's not very steep, because it started off insane. And so if it's still insane, it's, it hasn't changed that much. Yeah, and I don't know. It seemed kind of fun to, I think I've said this before. It's like, some people use their hair to express myself. I use Twitter.
I had a lot of friends of mine try to talk me out of starting a rocket company because they thought it was crazy. And one friend of mine made me watch a video of rockets blowing up. And there were just lots of people that thought it was a really crazy idea. And there were some people that had tried to start rocket companies, not succeeded, and they tried to talk me out of it. And but the thing is that the premise for talking me out of it was, well, we think you're going to lose the money that you invest. I was like, well, that was my expectation anyway. Right. So I don't really mind if I lose. I might, but I mean, it's not like I was trying to figure out the rank ordered best way to invest money, right. And on that basis, chose space. Right. It's not like that's. I thought, wow.
You weren't looking at like money market bonds, AAA bonds, right, exactly. Rocket company.
Like,
you weren't like
do real estate. Invest in shoemaking, anything. And space is highest ROI. Exactly. That is not what that wasn't the premise. I just thought that it was important that humanity expand beyond Earth, and we weren't doing that. So maybe there was something I could do to kind of spur that on.
Well, I was just saying that you want to take a moment to appreciate things in life and the sensations. Food's incredible, and there's just so many good things that you can experience. Some of them cost nothing, really. Have a walk in nature or just a nice meal, and it's like, wow, that's pretty great, And we should take a moment to appreciate these little things, the big things, the things that move your heart. I think that's probably the meaning of life, as close a definition as I can think. So you want to have like a good competitive forcing function so that you have to make the product better, or you'll lose. Like if you don't make the product better and improve the product for the end consumer, then that company should have relatively less prosperity compared to a company that makes better products. Now the car industry, is actually pretty competitive, mm-hmm. So that's good. But the good thing about a competitive industry is then if you make a product that's better, it's going to do better in the marketplace.
How much of your success do you attribute to having really audacious goals, or versus just not being focused on the short term, money coming in, or investors?
Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company. The most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it. and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
There may be some merit in having some longer-term family ownership, at least a portion of it, so it acts as a positive influence. This is still something I'm thinking about, but acting as a positive influence in the long term, so that the company kind of does proper long-term things. And like if you look at what happened also in Silicon Valley with HP, I mean, I think it's quite sad.
Yeah,
and that to some degree is because there was much diminished influence by the Hewlett and Packard families.
Right.
I think they should have prevailed in their, where they were opposed to the merger that took place at one point, and I think they were right, actually.
Right. And looking to the future for SpaceX, is there an IPO plan for this year?
No, there's no IPO plan.
No.
Let's say running a public company does have its drawbacks.
So you're not in a hurry?
No.
Okay.
I mean, in the case of Tesla and SpaceX, we had to raise capital, and we had kind of a complex equity structure that needed to be resolved by going public, and so I thought we kind of needed to do that in those two cases. We don't have to do that in SpaceX. I think there's a good chance we will at some point in the future, but SpaceX's objectives are super long term, and the market is not. So I'm a bit worried that if we did go public, certainly if we went public too soon, that that market pressure would force us to do short-term things and abandon kind of long-term projects.
Like going to Mars.
Right, going to Mars is very long-term.
Yes.
When I was in high school, I thought I'd most likely be doing physics at a particle accelerator. So that's what I was, physics and computers. I mean, I got distinctions in two areas, in physics and computer science, and those were, some of my two best subjects. And then I thought, okay, well, I want to figure out what's the nature of the universe, and so I'd, go try to working with people, banging particles together to see what happens. And then it sort of things went along, and the superconducting super collider got canceled in the US, and that actually was like, whoa, what if I was working at a collider, it's been all these years, and then the government just cancels it? Wow. And then that was like, I'm not going to do that. So it's like, we roll back a little. I was trying to figure out when I was a kid, I had like this existential crisis, and I was about 12 years old or something, and I was like, well, what does the world mean? What's it all about? We're living some meaningless existence. And then I made the mistake of reading Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, and I'm like, whoa, don't do that. Not need to be a little older, I think. No, actually, lately, these days, I sort of reread it, so I was like, he's not that bad. He's got issues, no question about it, but it's, anyway. But then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, which is like quite a good book on philosophy, I think. And it was like, okay, we don't really know what the answer is, obviously. But the universe is the answer. And really, what are the questions we should be asking to better understand the nature of the universe? And so then to the degree that we expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we'll better be able to ask the questions and understand why we're here or what it's all about. And so we should sort of take the set of actions that are most likely to result in us understanding what questions to ask about the nature of the universe.
Oh, I always thought we would fail, so this is it's all upside. You know, I thought maybe we had a 10% chance of reaching orbit starting out. So then people thought when we started SpaceX, they said, "Oh, you're going to fail." So I agree. I think we probably will fail. Yeah, but it's worth trying anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
How's that for honesty, huh?
Yeah. Let's I'd lose lose all the money from PayPal. I was like, well, you're probably right. You know, and we almost did. We had first 3 launches of Falcon 1 didn't work. Then the 4th one, we scraped together some parts, and that one worked. And if that one hadn't worked, that would have been it for us. So, I don't know, I really believe in the future of space, and I think it's important that we become a spacefaring civilization and be out there among the stars. And I think that's one of the things that makes people excited about the future. And we want the things that are in science fiction novels and movies not to be science fiction forever. We want them to be real one day.
If you think of what is education, you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. And it's actually amazingly bad in conventional education, because it shouldn't be this huge chore. So you're making it way better. But I mean, I think a lot of the things that I would say you've probably heard 100 times, and in fact are, if not doing, the more you can gamify the process of learning, the better. For my kids, I do not have to encourage them to play video games. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I have to pry them from their hands, like crack.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
It's drop that crack needle.
Yeah, yeah. You have that problem at your house too.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
The crack is addictive. Yeah.
So it's it's to the degree that you can make somehow learning like a game, then it's better. And I think unfortunately, a lot of education is very vaudevillian. You've got someone standing up there kind of lecturing at people, and they've done the same lecture 20 years in a row, and they're not very excited about it. And that lack of enthusiasm, is conveyed to the students. They're not very excited about it. They don't know why they're there. Why are we learning this stuff? We don't even know why. In fact, I think a lot of things people learn, probably there's no point in learning them. Because they never use them in the future.
Because who's going to launch a rocket into space? I mean, that's just yeah, exactly. That never happens.
Well, you have to say, people, I think, don't stand back and say, well, why are we teaching people these things? And we should tell them probably why we're teaching these things. Because a lot of kids just in school kind of puzzled as to why they're there. And I think if you can explain the why of things, then that makes a huge difference to people's motivation. Yeah. Then they understand purpose.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty important.
In thinking about the various problems that we're facing, or what would most likely change the future, when they were in college, there were sort of 5 things that I thought would be. I thought these were actually these. I would not regard this as a profound insight, but rather an obvious one. The internet would fundamentally change humanity, because it's like humanity would become more of a superorganism, because the internet is like a nervous system. Now suddenly any part of the human organisms anywhere would have access to all the information.
Amazing.
Instantly.
Neuralink.
Well, imagine if you didn't have a nervous system, you wouldn't know what's going on. Your fingers wouldn't know what's going on. Or your toes wouldn't know what's going on. You'd have to do it by diffusion. And the way information used to work was really by diffusion. One human would have to call another human. Or write them. Yes, like if it was a letter, you would have to write a letter. You'd have to hand that letter to another human. That would be carried through a bunch of things. Finally, another person would give it to you. Extremely slow diffusion. And if you wanted access to books, if you did not have a library, you were no, you don't have it. That's it. Right. So now you have access to all the books instantly. And if you can be in a remote, like, mountaintop jungle location or something and have access to all of humanity's information if you've got a link to the internet. This is a fundamental, profound change. You want to make something beautiful. I mean, you want to trigger whatever fundamental aesthetic algorithms are like in your brain. You have, I think, some intrinsic elements that represent beauty, and that trigger the emotion of appreciation of beauty in your mind. And I think that these are actually relatively consistent among people. I mean, not completely. Some people not everyone likes the same thing, but there's a lot of commonality. But I think it is important to combine aesthetic design with functionality. Like the thing that's, like if you say like what was really hard about, say, the Model S or the Model X, was to combine aesthetics and utility. So to balance the two. You can make a car look very good by giving it sort of certain proportions, like making it sort of low and slim, but if you do that, the utility is significantly affected. To make a sports car look good is relatively easy, but to make a sedan look good or an SUV look good is quite difficult. Really pay attention to the little details, the nuances of design and shape and form and function, and just the way it looks in different lights. And
when something's off, the little thing, how do you experience that?
It drives me bananas. Yeah. I mean, the problem is like if you can train yourself to pay attention to the tiny details. I think almost anyone can. Although this is a very much double-edged sword, because then you see all the little details, and then little things drive you crazy. But like most people they don't consciously see the small details, but they do subconsciously see them. Like you sort of, your mind takes in a gestalt of the overall, an overall impression, and you know if something is appealing or not, even though you may not be able to point out exactly why. And it's a summation of these many small details.
So most of us experience it as oh, I think that's ugly, or I think that's beautiful, or like, wow, that's elegant, but you can't break it down. You mentioned something in passing, like you can train yourself in this, though?
Yeah, you can train yourself, I think. You can make yourself pay attention to why. You essentially bring the subconscious awareness into conscious awareness.
God, I wish I could do that. How do you do that?
just pay really close attention.
Almost like a meditation on the object, and trying to find the details, like why do I not like this? Is that what?
Yeah, just look closely and carefully.
The physics training is a very good training, where it's a good framework for reasoning, where you're trained to think about first principles and reason from there. And that means boiling things down to the most fundamental truths, and then connecting those truths in a way to try to understand how reality is. Because physics has this problem where they're trying to figure out things that are totally counterintuitive. And so they had to have a framework for getting there. Like quantum mechanics is incredibly counterintuitive, but it's true. And so so physics developed a framework for figuring out things that aren't obvious. And that's why I think it's a lot of advice, but it's the right framework.
If you think about the future, you want a future that's better than the past. And so if we had something like the Hyperloop, I think that would be like cool. Like you'd look forward to the day that was working. And if something like that, even if it only was in one place, from LA to San Francisco or New York to DC or something like that, then it would be cool enough that it would be like a tourist attraction. It would be like a ride or something. So even if some of the initial assumptions didn't work out and the economics didn't work out quite as one expected, it would be like cool enough to be like, I want to journey that place just to ride on that thing. That would be pretty cool. And so that's, I think, how if you come up with a new technology, it should feel like that. You should really, like, if you told it to an objective person, would they look forward to the day that that thing became available? And be like, you know, it'd be pretty exciting to do something like that. Or an aircraft. Like, I thought it was really disappointing when the Concorde was taken out of commission and there was no supersonic transport available. And of course, the 787 has had some issues. But the thing is, the 787, even in the best case scenario, is only a slightly better version of the 777. And it's like, okay, you know, not that exciting.
You know, just in general, critical thinking is good. You know, examining whether you have the correct axioms, are the most applicable axioms, does the logic necessarily connect, and then what are the range of probable outcomes? Outcomes are usually not deterministic; they're a range, and so you want to figure out what those probabilities are, and make sure, ideally, that you're the house. You know, it's fine to take, it's fine to gamble so long as you're the house. I don't think everyone needs to go, you know, try to solve like some big world-changing problem. I mean, I think that, like, I really think, like, we should just think, like, are we doing something that's useful to the world? Like, if you're doing something useful, that's great. I just think that, like, just sort of a usefulness optimization is like, that's like a really good thing. You know, if you've done something that's useful to your fellow human beings, you've done a really good thing, and people should feel proud of doing that. You know, it doesn't always have to be something that's going to change the world. I mean, sometimes the world should just keep going in a particular direction.
Help the world.
Yeah, it might be going in the right direction, and I mean, in a lot of ways, the world is, and we are in great shape. In that, if you look at, say, violent crimes, you know, per capita in the world, it's at an like all-time low. We're actually quite prosperous, and you know, compared to history, and you know, I think there's a lot of things to feel good about in terms of how the world is today. Access to information is incredible. I mean, you know, anyone with like a $100 device has access to basically all the world's information, which is an incredible thing. Yeah, so I honestly, I just think like the best thing for people to try to do is say like, hey, what is something that I can do that would really be useful to the world, and just do that, you know, and it's great.
First of all, my goal is not disruption for the sake of disruption. I really think there's some important things we have to solve in order for the future to be good. I would say like my sort of algorithm or optimization is like, okay, what set of things do we need to do to ensure that increase the probability that the future is going to be good? And so if we have to solve sustainable energy, this is tautological. If we do not solve sustainable energy, then we have unsustainable energy. Then it's just a matter of time before before civilization collapses. We must, but even if there was not an environmental issue, since the availability of oil is limited, this is not something we can sustain long term. My original interest in electric vehicles was actually not environmental. It was out of concern, just studying physics, and I'm like, wait a second, we need to transition to solar electric, or we're going to have a problem, and we run out of oil, civilization collapses. That's a problem. Now, of course, the environmental concerns have added to the urgency. Because the more CO2 we put in the oceans and atmosphere, the more we increase the probability that something will go wrong. Like I said, like things are much more probability as opposed to certainty, but I think it's an unwise experiment to dramatically increase the CO2 in the atmosphere and oceans. Given that we know we need to transition anyway because we'll run out of oil. So why run that experiment? It's not. It doesn't make any sense. We know we have to transition to a sustainable energy economy. Then let's just get on with it. Let's just get on with it and not run the crazy experiment and see what happens if the atmosphere has 2,000 ppm CO2. This is crazy. Yeah, I think I wanted to spur ideas and thinking about the long-term need to
I think this is one of those things that's going to take a while to figure out what the right solution is. And especially to figure out what the best economics are for CO2 removal, and all the think through all the consequences. You don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. So sometimes people say, "Well, just plant a bunch of trees." I'm like, that's not so easy. Like
a trillion trees.
Sure, exactly. And then you got to okay, well, you need to get fertilizer. You're going to water them. Where's the water going to come from? What habitat are you potentially destroying where the trees used to be? It's not just it's a no-brainer of just go plant a bunch of trees.
But it's not to say that's not a good, viable option.
We should plant some trees. I'm in favor of planting trees. It's just not a question of okay, there are vast sections of like the Sahara Desert or some large barren areas, very dry areas in the U.S. Where you could in theory plant a lot of trees, but you're going to need a lot of water. And you're going to need you're going to have to cultivate them. It's not like they don't just throw some seeds on the ground.
We'll drop them from orbit.
And I mean, so just I think it'd be good to sort of kind of frame the debate and understand, okay, what things are really going to move the needle? How much are they going to move the needle? If we're talking about getting tens or hundreds of billions of tons of carbon, in what form will that carbon be? Will it be stable over time? And like I said, what is it going to cost humanity to do? However it's paid for, what is it going to cost? What's the thing that's going to be most affordable?
Look for evidence of exceptional ability. So it's not, or at least aspirationally, sometimes these things get messed up in recruiting, or the recruiting filter ends up being wrong. I sometimes wonder with Tesla, if Nikola Tesla applied to Tesla, would we even give him an interview? It's not clear. This guy came from some weird college somewhere in Eastern Europe. He's got some odd mannerisms. Now, we don't know if we should give him an interview. I worry that that's actually what we do instead of it should be man, Nikola Tesla, this kid's super smart. What does he want? We'll pay him anything. That should be that should be the reaction if Nikola Tesla applies, to Tesla, ironically. But I can tell you the intent is we're looking for evidence of exceptional ability, and it really doesn't matter if you went to graduate high school or college or anything. We're just looking for evidence of exceptional ability, such that it would be a good predictor for doing exceptional things at SpaceX.
Fully considered cost actually just means that if there are, you want to look at both the benefits and the costs actually. So if in sequestering carbon, removing it from the atmosphere or oceans, has some perhaps some environmental impact, which might be small, but it's not negative. That certainly needs to be taken into account. And then by the same token, if what's done is in extracting carbon is a useful product from which you can generate revenue, then that should count too. So I don't know, I'm just sort of saying for argument's sake, construction material,
cement.
Cement,
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I'll talk about that later.
Or some kind of useful rocks that are useful, or sand, or I don't know. Something that's useful for construction. Then you could say, okay, well, this is what we could sell it for, and and then just fully consider pros and cons, and say, okay, this is what, if we need to pay to have it done in the future, which we probably will have to do, then what's the lowest net cost?
If you want another amazing Elon Musk video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I think there's maybe there are definitely some good schools out there, but I think some of the mistakes, at least in my opinion, that I see being made in education is